Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eileen Mammen, and I haven't been giving a webinar in a couple of weeks, partly because everybody's really busy and it's summer. I'm going to try to talk about something that's very relevant to all of us. One of that would be basically, we know that sixth graders need study school preparation because they're going to be entering a different phase in their life. Before the pandemic, they would actually enter a new school. But the situation metaphorically is pretty much the same. They're going to be entering a new phase in their life where they're not going to have one classroom teacher and they're going to have several teachers. Actually, I've never been or lived through a pandemic before, so I don't know how this is going to be handled in high school and middle school. I'm an old school go to school type of person. So I think the pandemic is taking us all by surprise. And I can't even advise or even suggest what's going to happen in August and September and for the remaining of the year or for the year after that. But I can definitely say with certainty that there's going to be some very definite study skills for middle school and beyond that are especially important now that your child is home with you, at least for a little while. So we're going to use the word study skills basically to mean anything like what we would say survival skills. I've always found that one of the things that I work with my own children and I work with my children in practice is they need to get organized. And I think that's true of children and adults. So I'm going to say right up front that organized parents usually impart that in their children. So again, if you want your child to get organized, show them how. And one of those things would be through calendars and actually plotting your time and good time management. So let's go through what you're going to do as a parent when your child is home to help them get organized. And then we'll go through a couple of other things. And like in all my other webinars, please, if you do have any questions, feel free to definitely ping me and I will get to you. Okay, the first thing we need to do is to provide a place to study for your child where there is a large enough surface so that your child can spread out papers and books. Make sure that the child is well replenished with pens, papers, calculators. Make sure your child has good lighting and a study chair that's right as far as the height. Make sure that your child has working electronics. If they're not working, you don't want to try to fix them when they're in class. You want to fix them after or before. Okay. I think another thing that you want to do with your child, you're a sixth grader, and this would apply to just about anybody. This is for all ages. Would be to develop a system to keep track of important papers. If your child is one who gets a turn in homework or can't keep track of how long he or she's been or how they've been doing in class, a binder with a folder in front with completed work ready to be turned in and a folder in the back is also very important. When you actually physically go to school, you generally get that at the beginning of the year, but because we're in the middle of a pandemic, well, this will be different. And most of the onus of organizing your children and actually being responsible for their homework will fall now on the parents. I would say for me, staying organized means creating a system and basically sticking to it. It's like a diet. You want to lose weight. You can't get on it when the food you want is not presented. It's kind of a commitment. When I had my 4 children at home, I had color coding organizing and I used dividers. But really what mattered most was any method that I stuck with. And when I stuck with it long enough, I imparted it to my children and we kind of accepted it as like the law of the land, okay? You need to make sure your child has a planner and uses it. It might be helpful for writing everything down for each assignment, or some children, like many, are very computer savvy, so they're going to type it in there. I think this might be a case where when you write it down, you may remember it better. Everybody's different. I would check it off when it's complete. Um, you may have to keep track of it and leave it open so you can take a look at it and kind of work with your child to make sure that they're actually planning their time correctly. I would also encourage you to estimate how long each assignment will take. And the schedule has to be realistic. You're not going to get everything done in a few days. Some assignments are drawn out. They may take longer. In that case, you may have to plan how you're going to work with it. One of the questions a parent posed to me just now is, we have come up with a system and many times it's very awful. It's difficult to sustain it. It's very true. Well, I think at that point, what you need to do is decide if the system is working for you as well. If it's working for the parent and you like it, then you're the one that's basically going to work with it and teaching it to your child. If it's working for your child, but it's not working for you, again, that's also encouraging because your child is getting the work done. It has to work for one side. If it's not working for both, we want to discard it. If it's not working for you and you don't like it and your child is not benefiting from it, it's probably time to get a new one. I always found color coding and dividers and things that were like eye-catching to be very helpful. And it would be like a system, you know, like we plan our schedules around cooking times and cleaning times and fixing things and going out. We need to plan a time to study. And when you go to middle school, part of that's going to take a little bit of time, and there's going to be mistakes because certain things are going to take longer than you thought. Certain things are going to happen quickly. So you don't really know. So yeah, it's kind of a learning experience for both sides. Thank you for asking that question. Now, your job as a parent, it used to be shared teacher-parent, but you're going to be the one that's home with your child for an indefinite period of time. It falls on the parents to help your child keep track of the time spent studying. Rather than staring at a blank page, have him think about or have her think about how they're using their time. If he or she is spending too much time on a subject, that might be a signal that he needs extra help or tutoring. So if someone is just staring blankly into space or looking at a piece of paper and no work's getting done, and you're not in a position to help, that is a way of saying help, and you need to reach out to someone that can help them. Unfortunately, parents are now teachers, tutors, and everything else aside from the regular jobs you have, and especially if you have multiple children. But there's certain clues to look for. Not everybody is comfortable asking for help. Big research projects may seem less overwhelming and will less likely be left until the last minute if it's done in manageable chunks. Each particular part of the research project could basically have its own timeline. And what that means is you may say, okay, let's say we're doing a research paper. Let's get through the topic sentence. Let's get through the intro paragraph. Let's get that done by tomorrow, and it's manageable. As an adult, I also get daunted if I've got this big project in front of me and I'm like thrown into it. It's like I chunk it out and reward myself by taking breaks, getting myself a cup of coffee, maybe making a phone call. So that's my reward for actually doing what I set out to do. And honestly, it feels really good inside when something is meaningful and you feel like you've accomplished something. It doesn't feel good inside when you're supposed to get something done and it's not done on time, and you're giving excuses and you're trying to find ways of why it wasn't done. That's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling on either end. So also what we want to do at all times is make our children feel that they're getting something out of it, and we want them to feel in control and empowered. And if they don't feel like they're like living up to their expectations or your expectations, that's not a good feeling. It's going to really be hard. I used to always communicate with my child's teachers. I don't know how that's going to fly, in the next couple of months, but maybe we'll be able to reach out to the teachers and they'll be more open. Maybe they can, because they never met us except online. So we're going to hope that'll change, and that may prevent a lot of miscommunication with your own child. I think what we need to do as parents is we need to ask better questions. Did you do your homework? Because they could say yes or no, or I'm almost done. I think we need to ask better questions to get better answers. It's not putting your child on the spot, it's actually making them accountable. And I think that's part of the growth process. I would ask questions like, what information do you need to do this assignment? Where are you going to look for it? Where do you think you should begin? What do you need to do next? Can you describe how you're going to solve the problem? How did you solve the problem? What did you try that didn't work? Why does the answer seem right to you? And tell us more about this part. So not only have you involved yourself in your child's learning, but you've also asked open-ended questions. That way, no one can say, yep, yes, no, maybe. You're getting some detailed information because you're actually allowing them to speak. If we don't have any questions, let's talk about studying for tests. Studying for tests is a skill, but for struggling students, it's difficult and it's a mystery. Parents can help their children manage their time and attention, which means turning off the cell phone, the TV, the iPod, the electronics. When you want to help your child, I'm going to say this with complete certainty. Rereading something and going over something is not the same as learning. Sometimes rereading something is difficult because by then it's totally boring. If you didn't understand it the first time, reading it again is not going to mean that you understand it the second time. Reviewing alone is not enough to study. You might want to understand that the big problem would be that a lot of students spend a lot of time reviewing the concepts, but that doesn't mean they're learning them. I would suggest when you're reading something for the first time to create sheets with practice problems or questions or annotations, which is practicing before you finish reading. So while you're reading it for the first time, you're asking yourself questions. So you're actually interacting with the material. We're going to say reviewing is very similar to memorizing, where you're jamming it all in your brain because you have to. It doesn't mean you learned it. It doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you got anything out of it. It just means that you're stuffing it in your short-term memory to complete a test. And in about 2 or 3 weeks, when you need to call forth this information, well, I don't know if you'll be able to remember it. Okay. I have a question here. Okay. Should they study each subject every day? Well, that's another very good question. And the answer to that question is they should review or think about each subject every day. It's kind of like what we call the practice system. Let's say a child's learning an instrument. Well, would you practice every day? Yes, you would. Instead of practicing 3 hours on a Thursday to Thursday, it might be more helpful to practice 20 minutes every day so that you kind of have that rhythm going. Yes, I would suggest studying every day. And when you're reading it for the first time, which again, I'm going to mention, you don't need to reread things and make it painful. There's other ways students can practice active learning. You can highlight notes. I don't like Post-it notes because they get lost and they're terribly annoying. And after a while, you have so many Post-its, you don't even know what the Post-its mean. Making study cards, some children are nice with that, they like it. And mapping and diagramming concepts in your own language. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody but the student. I also want to say that some people are more productive at different times of the day. Some people focus better in the morning, others at night. Some focus better after a meal, some focus better after a nap. We have different energy levels. What is your child's energy level? If they're a morning person, that's when they will do best to review, read, and accomplish, because as we go further in the day, our energy levels ebb. So if they're better at night and they like to gather up all their information at the end of the day, that would be their time. So you could have twins that operate differently, one in the morning, one in the evening, and that's just because we're all different people. We have our own biorhythm. I did say that I don't believe in memorization, but I will also qualify that by saying that sometimes we just have to memorize, especially when we're talking about Greeks. You may have used like a mnemonic key to remember the colors of the rainbow, which would be red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and indigo, violet. Or my very educated mother just sent us 9 pieces to remember the correct order of the planets. By creating mnemonic devices, our brain is able to trigger in. When I was in 3rd grade, I couldn't spell arithmetic. So my mother made up a story for me to remember, and it played out like an acronym. A rat in Tommy's house may eat Tommy's ice cream. If you take each one of those words, it's arithmetic. And then to this day, so many years later, I remember it and I can spell arithmetic, but I have to go through that little sequence. And that's okay, that's how my mind worked. We can make silly mnemonic devices together. And actually what you're doing at that point is you're making learning fun and you're lightening up the session. It's not like drill and kill. I believe in drill and kill sometimes, but not often. And in a case where someone is trying to memorize something like dates or the French Revolution, memorizing the date would be important. Plus, it will stick in your mind, hopefully for the rest of your life. You want to help your child make the most of their time. If they're a review sheet carrier, have them walk with it, have them make 2 copies, leave one at home, one in the car, and then you always have access to it. You can take a look at it in the doctor's waiting room. I know those days might be over for a little while, even in a traffic jam. So you have your child stay productive at any time. And when you actually incorporate studying and learning and reviewing into your life, you have more time for basketball, you have more time for family time, and without guilt. And without guilt is a good feeling. So, and I just got a really important question. How are you parents going to survive in the fall? Well, I believe in parents supporting parents. I think it might be difficult, especially if you've got 2 or more children, because you're going to have different schedules, plus your own schedule, and you're not going to really have the same time you had. We rally. You have to be extremely organized, and I keep something in mind. When I was a mother of 4, and I had totally a chaotic house most of the time, and there was chaos coming and going, and I had so many teachers, and I had so many projects, and I was basically a one-woman show because my husband was working full time, and a couple of neighbors helped me out. One thing I remember that I always had, and I'm going to pass this on to each and every parent, your kids are going to grow up real fast, real fast. And one day you're going to look back and you're going to say, gee, I got through it, and kind of get a little teary-eyed when you see them as adults, but you'll be real proud of them. I always kept 2 things in my back pocket or in my purse. I kept my patience and I kept my sense of humor, because a lot of the stuff, it does work out. And if you can laugh about it, and if you're really patient and you say, okay, it's not working now, we've got to revisit this later. It's really all about being human. Of course, it's a lot different now that I don't have little kids all over the place all the time, but I was once in your shoes and I totally get it. Make sure that your child knows the basics. If your child is struggling and they're starting any grade level, especially 6, when there's a lot of stuff going on, get yourself that tutor to help out. Your children need to know basic multiplication and division skills, basic writing skills. Reading skills need to be up to par, and basic vocabulary skills. You may, again, in the course of your survival, you may have to look for other sources of support. Keep contact information. Usually I found that my gut was usually right. And I found that waiting till after something happened was not the best approach. I would use my gut before something happened. Like if I got that little, feeling that something was wrong, I was usually right. There was something wrong. Invest in help from other adults, from students, from your own siblings, and make it into like an experience where you're all going to grow. You could even, if you have a sibling at home to help, or you want to use a tutoring service, make sure that you reward them and you thank them, and make sure that, your child is interacting well. Remember, we don't want your children frustrated. We want your children challenged, but not frustrated. Above all, reflect on what works. Some questions you can ask your child. How do you know when you've studied enough? Like, do they feel satisfied? Do they feel they know it? Do they feel complete? How did you keep yourself focused? We don't want a child multitasking when they're supposed to be studying, so you probably need to monitor the screen when they're studying, make sure that they're off any sites you don't want them to be on when they're studying. How much time did you plan to spend, and how much did you actually spend, and kind of weigh that out? And how would you do it differently next time? So if your child, especially if you're doing a project for the first time and you're entering a new school, you're going to be a lot more prepared the second time. But I think another factor that we need to think about is help your child de-stress. Before I go on, I've got 2 questions here. Someone just commented that we need to have patience. Yeah, and it's really, really hard. It's really hard because, we're so spread out. And, I thank you for saying that. I know that in the beginning of a day, my patience is really very, very good. I can handle anything, climb any mountain. At the end of the day, my patience is very limited. And because basically I'm a morning person. So when I worked with my children and they had homework in the evening, I would do it, as soon as I got home from school, because I knew that after I made dinner and after I did all my things, I was like spent for the day and I needed to decompose. Do what works for you, because remember, the parent, like when you've heard the expression, when mom's happy, everybody's happy. When dad's happy, everybody's happy. You give off vibes to your kids. And when you're impatient, even if they're struggling and trying to learn, sometimes we're very short and we regret that, and then we have our guilt. So this leads up to probably one of my final points. Help your child de-stress. Good study skills can help reduce anxiety, and so can relaxation exercises and regular physical activity. Everybody should be walking now. Everybody should have a form of exercise, a mental activity that just takes you away from where we are, kind of stuck in our homes, dealing with the pandemic, all the activity in our lives, all the controversies. You need to have a place where you go and decompose. Again, you know your child best. Pick up on your gut. Let your gut guide you. If your child seems unusually anxious about tests, talk to them about it. Find out what makes them nervous. Maybe they're focusing in on the fact the pressure is getting to them and that clock is ticking and they can hear the clock. Maybe you want to remove that clock or put them in another area so the clock is not ticking in the background, which is not a big deal to some people, but might be a big deal to someone taking a test. If the work seems too difficult for your child or the workload is too great, contact the school, contact the tutor, contact the people living in your home. I would say have a conversation with the child. Maybe your child doesn't need to be doing 100 problems to practice a concept. Maybe 10 is just fine. Maybe some of it is reinforcement and maybe some of it is not. Again, as a parent, you know that. That's when you'd want to talk to the teacher, and I'm not quite sure if that's going to be doable at this time. But if there's no other questions, I think what I do want to say is that parents know their child best, and you reflect and think about your gut when you're reaching out to your child. Systems in place work for the parent and the child. and it becomes kind of routine and automatic. If it's not working, change it. We know that there's many mistakes we have to make along the way before we reach success. There's no harm in trying something new or discarding something that doesn't work. Make sure that your child is actually focusing when they're working or studying or doing homework. Make sure there's open communication so your child doesn't have to give you the yes, no answers, and they can explain to you what's actually going on, and you could read them at that point. Remember that rereading is not the same as learning. It's not like, oh, you didn't get it, reread it again. I don't like to reread anything because the second time I read it, I kind of get a little resentful. So when I read something complicated for the first time, I am marking it up so that I only have to read it once and I'm actually interacting with the material, and then I don't have to go back and go in there again. I'm taking any more questions you may have from all Talent Nook to everyone. Thank you for attending. I've got one more question, I think, here. And please email us at info@talentnook.com to talk to me for a little longer. Everybody, be safe, be well. And this is Eileen Mammen with It Was Nice being with you again. Have a good day.